Every once in a while a movie will cast an adult actor in a role that symbolises a child. A lot of the time this occurs in fantasy films such as Judy Garland as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Her version of Dorothy looks like a late teen but acts like she's under the age of 10. And sometimes it happens in the realms of comedy, such as Laurel and Hardy being extremely childlike in both intellect and emotional temperament.
If I find out who did it, they'll stand in the corner.
Same goes for the Three Stooges, who basically play fight and misbehave like hyperactive kids. The casting of an adult as a symbolic child can happen for a variety of reasons, one of which is that adult actors tend to be more reliable and less restricted in terms of the number of hours they're able to work on set. Or sometimes they're just better actors. In the case of Wizard of Oz, having Dorothy played by an adult allows the character to be seen in states of extreme emotional distress and crying without it being too upsetting for the audience.
That's how much longer you've got to be alive. And it isn't long, my pretty. I'm frightened, Annie. I'm frightened.
We don't want to see a kid go through all that. Then there's the horror genre, and particularly the teen slasher variety of horror movies, which tend to involve naive young people discovering both sexual experiences and other dangers that lie outside the comfort zone of their childhood school-age years. A good example of this is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy Krueger was a child killer before he was burned alive, and as an evil spirit, he murders teenagers who are symbolic children to the slaughter. The censors would have been very unlikely to allow a child to be torn up with finger knives on screen, would they? And audiences would have been put right off as well. In teen slasher movies, it's also very common for teenage protagonists to be referred to as kids by older characters, an indication that that is what they are symbolically. In studying Blair Witch Project recently, I came to the conclusion that its central trio of characters also double up as symbolic children, though the metaphor isn't quite as obvious as it is in, say, The Wizard of Oz or Laurel and Hardy. The ending should be a giveaway of the symbolism, actually. The three filmmakers have interviewed people about children being murdered by the witch and babies going missing or mysteriously dying. They're told that a killer named Rustin Parr had killed kids in a house in the woods, making one of them face in a corner while he killed the first one and then taking the second one out the corner to kill them too. So when Heather finds Mike stood facing in a corner at the end of the film before she is attacked, it's almost like a revelation that the three central characters were symbolic children to the slaughter all along. However, I think a distraction occurs in this moment. The scene is also a revelation that Rustin Parr, the dead child killer, was possessed by the witch when he committed the murders. That's a simple plot point, but recognising that the three main characters represent children to the slaughter requires the audience to step beyond conventional plot structure logic and to instead think about the characters as psychological archetypes. Most people don't consciously view movies in that way, so what should be obvious here at the symbolic level still escapes us. However, if we jump way back to the start of the movie with the children to the slaughter metaphor in mind, the film can be experienced in quite a different way. In fact, the trio don't just double up as children to the slaughter, they also are symbolic infants to the slaughter. Sounds far out, doesn't it? Well, let's go through the film and look at some of the many details that potentially fit with this grisly interpretation. First thing is that having a film crew go into the forest and be hunted by a witch didn't in itself require young characters who appear to be in their early to mid-20s. A trio of older actors playing older characters could have been used and it still would have served the basic plot. But no, these characters are specified with a youthful vulnerability and inexperience that makes them more susceptible to danger. This is really important. Heather meets Josh and asks him to come into the house, and we see that house before cutting to inside. Now, I don't know if this is her parents' place or a house she rents with her boyfriend. We never do get to see who the guy was who was holding the camera in the opening shot, but we hear his voice a little bit.
Oh, you look a little blurry there. Let me zoom out on you.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it?
Okay, I got you.
This is my home.
Okay.
However, Heather's parents will be brought up a couple of times later in the film, and with great significance. After a shot in the house, we cut to Mike, and he is leaving his mother's house.
I guess you're Mike. Don't we
get to meet your mama?
So Mike lives with one or both of his parents, and he's probably never lived independently before. They get to the cemetery, and we get some background on the kids and infants who have been killed or gone missing from the town.
There are an unusually high number of children laid to rest here. Yet no one in the town seems to recall anything unusual about this time.
Tiny gravestones and a statue of a kid as if it's the spirit of a dead child. One of the gravestones details someone's dead daughter. Oh, parallel with Heather perhaps. Though all of this is presented in a casual documentary style, the sense of great tragedy still comes through. And Heather's final words here are paralleled by the kids' handprints seen in Rustin Parr's house at the end of the movie.
Yet legend tells a different story, one whose evidence is all around us, etched in stone.
Then on to their interviews with local residents about the child killer and the witch and the missing kids. Again, we have statements here paralleled in the movie's ending.
Yeah, it's a story my grandmother used to tell us all. Make us go to bed early.
Really?
Say if you stay up after dark or walk around the house too much, a Blair Witch will come and get you.
Heather and Mike, the symbolic kids, will be attacked by the witch as they explore a house in the dark at the end of the movie. We're never told exactly how Rustin Parr killed the kids, but the evidence of Josh being tortured later suggests that this may have been the fate of the kids too. And here's a really grim piece of background information on that. On the official Blair Witch Project website, which has now been taken down, I'm not sure why, but it's gone, but I took this screen capture of the historical backstory timeline, and it says that after one of the kids was taken, for 13 days afterwards, lucky 13, the river was clogged with oily bundles of sticks. So I think the clear suggestion is that these bundles contained body parts from the missing girl. Was she killed outright, or did she suffer horrifically for 13 days afterwards? It's horrible, isn't it? But that's the suggestion. We have this kid with her mother, and then Mary talks of her encounter with the witch when she was a child. And after this, there are assorted little indications that the characters sort of identify as kids. At the motel, Heather says she's going to call her mother, as a kid or teenager might do, ensuring your parents know where you are.
Okay, we're gonna do an equipment check, but I'm gonna call my mom.
Okay, I've got a bag of oats and a beer.
In the forest, she refers to Mike as being equivalent to a kid.
And I'm very pleasantly surprised by our little Mikey.
Our little
Our
Mikey.
little Mikey.
In the night scenes, they act like little kids terrified of the dark. Heather crying in the tent near the end is like a little kid hiding under the covers. They get lost in the forest, and one of the biggest fears of young kids, especially toddlers, is being lost or abandoned by their parents. It terrifies them because they know their daily survival depends directly on parents. They go looking for a cemetery and instead find a little stone area full of small rock piles. Primitive cemetery, if you will. The number of rock piles looks to be significant.
5, 6, 7.
7. That's the same as the number of kids who Rustin Parr killed.
They searched his house and they found the bodies of 7 kids from the area.
So I think these are like little graves or markers for the 7 kids. And this is supported by the fact that on the following night, 3 rock piles are covertly placed by the tent, one for each of the 3 filmmakers. An indication that they are going to die. But it also draws a parallel in regards to the trio being symbolic kids to the slaughter. The stick figures they find, I think, carry a similar implication. They're like the hanging skeletons or bodies of kids and infants, just as there was a small hanging Halloween skeleton outside Mike's parents' house, and hanging witch figures in this cafe scene. They all seem to cross over into each other, don't they? They look like little people who've been executed by hanging from the neck, and their crude design also looks like something a child might make. Then we have the sound of kids and babies outside the tent at night. The clear suggestion is that these are the ghosts of the dead kids. But I think this scene ties in with a piece of child psychology that's common in horror movies. When the ghosts of dead children show up and torment the living, I think the general implication is one of identification. Seeing the ghost of a dead child is a warning or announcement that the character who sees the dead kid is the next in line for slaughter. Not only is it a suggestion of unavoidable fate of suffering and death, but also suggests that the living character is vulnerable in the manner of an unprotected child. Remember in Nightmare on Elm Street, the nursery rhymes about Freddy Krueger coming for you, sung by children? It's like a mockery. You are a helpless child is the message. The slaughtered twins in The Shining are a direct implication that Danny will be slaughtered too. Or the crying baby heard in this scene of Hellraiser. This adult is the symbolic infant about to be attacked. There's loads of examples of this in classic horror movies, and by the way, if you're interested in exploring the depths of those 3 classic movies, I've got several studies of them here on my channel. Check these videos out. And I've got a massive article on The Shining on my website written in 2008, and that article has been repeatedly drawn upon by the corporate funded YouTube film channels to flesh out their videos on that film. So go to the source, folks. This is where it all started. In fact, if you'll indulge me a moment longer, I'm going to plug some more of my offline videos on Blair Witch Project before we continue, because my work isn't funded by YouTube ad revenue. It's funded by sales of my offline content. So yesterday I put out a new 37-minute video called Blair Witch Project Natural Torments. And that one's all about the non-supernatural traumas of the characters, which is a pretty interesting aspect of the movie that gets massively overlooked. I've got another long video called The Sadistic Filmmakers. That one's on Blair Witch Project as well, and a really long video called The Hidden Horrors of Blair Witch Project. You can watch part 1 of that latter video here on YouTube, and the other half is available on my website. But you can also access my 2 most recent Blair Witch Project studies by becoming a monthly supporter of mine on Patreon. The links for all this extra content are in the video description below. Okay, back to the film analysis. Heather's personal identification as being a child, not an adult, is present in this line.
If I never cross another stream on a log for the rest of my life, I will die a happy girl.
Die a happy girl. She identifies with being a girl, not a woman. And I'm not talking woke psychology here, I'm talking movie symbology actually. Is there much difference? Anyway, we have the guys increasingly acting like kids who lack the willpower to deal with the situation, and they resort to sulking or rolling about. You ever seen kids kind of act like that when they're in a situation they don't want to be in? And though I don't think this was intended, the intellectual stupidity of the characters at times could be taken as furtherance of their childlike nature at the symbolic level. Kids also go into denial a lot, even more than adults do, and denial is something these 3 characters engage in quite a bit in this film.
No, Mike, it's not the same log. Look, it's not.
It is! Open your eyes!
Here we have Mike framed low in the picture, making him look small and vulnerable. And here we have a direct reference to the Wizard of Oz.
Which Wicked Witch was worse, the Wicked Witch of the East or the Wicked Witch of the West?
The Wicked Witch of the West was the bad one.
Let's go east.
So Mike is taken to making decisions based upon a kid's fairy tale belief system. And remember in the Wizard of Oz, there wasn't just a witch, there was a child symbolising protagonist hunted by the witch, but played by Judy Garland. A fairy tale belief system also frames Blair Witch Project because the movie takes place around Halloween. In Heather's final monologue, she talks about her naivety, a childhood trait, and apologises to Mike and Josh's parents and says goodbye to her own parents. So that's a lot more childhood framing. Finally, into the big scary old derelict house, the kind of place kids fear intensely, especially attics and basements, with that additional reminder in the form of kids' handprints that Heather and Mike are kids to the slaughter. Unless Mike was hypnotised by the witch somehow, his immediate compliance of standing in a corner is completely out of character for him, for an adult anyway. But it is something a child in shock and terror would be more likely to do if ordered by their captor. So there you go, the symbolic children to the slaughter interpretation fits with a lot of what we see in this movie, and it frames it in a more interesting and terrifying way. I suppose we could say the trio have gone through a symbolic time warp, where they are reliving the journeys of children who were abducted, probably tortured, and eventually killed by the witch several generations ago. Oh, and I'll just add one more lovely thought to help you sleep well tonight. When the ghosts of murdered kids show up in horror stories, there's usually an extra implication that is perhaps the worst of all. Not only was the child brutally killed, but their tormented souls are forever trapped in the context of the murderer. So when the kids in this film are heard mocking the trio in the tent, they may as well be chanting,
Come and play with us. Forever.
But it's not all complete doom and gloom though, because I think one of the basic psychological functions of teen slasher movies and of Blair Witch Project is that it's a way for the audience to remind themselves and emotionally deal with the real world dangers of psychotic killers and sadists, which, though they are thankfully very rare, are sometimes even more horrific than anything we ever get to see in the movies. These movies are sort of a reminder not to get into cars or beds with strangers, and not to wander too far into places where an attacker can isolate you. Don't forget, I have a 37-minute Blair Witch Project that I just put out yesterday, available on my site and available to my Patreon supporters. And if you are considering the Patreon option, which allows me to produce more free content for YouTube if enough of you sign up, then here's some of the other videos of mine that you can access upon signing up. We've got the Greatest Scream Villains, the Terminator 86-minute video, Alien Hypnotic by Design 2-hour video, Alien The Machinery of Existence 90-minute video. We've got an exploration of the sexuality in the James Bond title sequences, covering all of the title sequences of those movies. That's a 46-minute video. We've got the Haunted Biology of Hellraiser, 54 minutes. And we've got my full study of Night of the Living Dead, 66 minutes. Or you can order any of those items individually as downloads at my website, collativelearning.com. You've been listening to Rob Ager. Thanks for watching, folks. Hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to subscribe and click that notification button if you want to make sure that you're made aware of any future uploads, because according to YouTube analytics, only about 9% of my subscriber base actually have their notifications switched on. So some of you are going to be missing out if you haven't got it switched on. Okay, later, folks. Have a good one. Bye-bye.